pandemic is sort of out in the hall too, we're going to start with another item. It will be somewhat brief. Yeah, so we'll be good. So it won't take a super long time. So, all right. Good afternoon, everyone. I will call to order our regularly scheduled meeting of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee. And my name is Elizabeth Glidden. I am the chair of this committee, and I'm joined today by Council Members Quincy, Fry, Council President Johnson, and Council Member Andrew Johnson. And we are a quorum of the committee able to do business today. And looks like we've been joined, I think, by almost all of our guests, so we will proceed. We have 4 items on our agenda today. One was an addendum, which is an update on the Metropolitan Council's equity plan for, and I think this might be mislabeled. It's an equity plan for transit, regional transit, as opposed to a plan for Southwest LRT. So we might just amend that title after the meeting today, since I know things were put on the agenda in quick order. So I am going to ask that we move item number 4 actually to the number 3 spot. And so we'll take care of our first 2 items, which will be extremely brief. The first item is to approve a resolution relating to our automated property system. This would authorize the city of Minneapolis to charge a fee to scrap vehicle operators and scrap metal dealers for use of the automated property system to cover costs of operating and maintaining the system. And this would be approving a resolution of state law that occurred this past legislative session. Melissa Lesh.
Good morning, good afternoon, Madam Chair and council members. Councilmember Glidden described this accurately. The RCA that you have in front of you is the local approval of a special law that was passed this legislative session. And what this special law does is it permits the city of Minneapolis to expand our current automated property system, which is the system the police department uses and is used now statewide for the reporting of not stolen items, but items that are sold in pawn shops and secondhand shops to determine if they might be stolen. And this initiative that we've been working for the last several years on with the Ramsey County Attorney's Office would take that system and expand that to also require reporting to that system of scrap metal as well. And so what the special law that was passed this legislative session that we are asking for your local approval for today, and we'll be going to Ways and Means next week, would permit the city to expand that system and charge a fee of no more than 72 cents per transaction for those scrap transactions. That fee was determined over the course of the last year, working with a broad group of stakeholders to figure out how many dealers are there, how many transactions per year, what will it cost to build out the system. So we've been working really well with particularly some of our local scrap industry in the cities. They've been, in the city of Minneapolis, they've been terrific, as well as our partners at the Ramsey County Attorney's Office. So that work group will continue to work to develop this system. So what you're approving today is not anything about an RFP or a billing or anything for the system. You are simply approving your own authority, accepting your own authority to enact that fee should you choose to in the future.
All right, thank you for the presentation, and I will go ahead. Is there a question from Council President Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Melissa, do you know, Ms. Lesh, excuse me, so we have to decide later on if we're going to charge a fee, but do we also get, there was some, whatever you'd call it, intellectual property involved in this? Do we have some sort of patent is probably not the correct word, but on that?
Madam Chair and Council President Johnson, yes. Within the Intellectual Property Division of the Police Department, there are to my knowledge, 2 primary programs. One is Workforce Director, which is the system that we, and I believe also Hennepin County Sheriff's Office and some other jurisdictions use for their time management. That is a patented program, as well as the APS system.
Okay, so these vendors will have to pay a fee, obviously, to even use the intellectual property?
Well, Madam Chair and Council President, the way that it would work would be this 72-cent fee would be passed on to the consumer. So whether you were selling one piece of scrap or 100 pounds of scrap, you would be charged at the max
One
72
transaction.
cents. It's a one-time transactional fee. And that then is statutorily required in the bill that we passed this year to be kind of reinvested into the system, that can only be used for the maintenance of that program, and there has to be a nexus because it is basically an enterprise fund. And then the plan would be to use that revenue to then build out the system to cover scrap metal.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm really appreciative of all the effort on this because this is it's a high concern in my community. So it's great that we're going this route. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I'm not seeing further questions, so I will go ahead and move approval of this item. All in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That item is approved. Next item on our agenda is the proposed charter amendment, which relates to sale of wine and beer in certain establishments, and this has been called the 70-30 rules for certain restaurants in certain locations in Minneapolis. And I am actually going to move to postpone this for one cycle in committee. There is a second charter amendment that is moving forward from the Charter Commission as well. It relates to filing fees for candidates, and I believe the recommendation from the clerk and the city attorney was that we take action on these two items together. There is a timeline that we need to be aware of for taking action, and the action we will be able to take is not whether or not these items are on the ballot, but rather just what will be the final language of the ballot question. That is what is before the city council. So I don't know, before I make the motion, was there any further comment? So we are well within our time frame. I guess that's maybe the bottom line is we are well within our time frame, including if we postpone this one cycle. Any further comment from Mr. Ginder or?
No, Chair, you're correct, that we are within the time frame, and we're going to try to handle both ballot questions at the same time.
All right, thank you very much. And so I will move, let's postpone this one cycle. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, and that item then is postponed one cycle within the committee. Next item that we are going to go to our item that involves some guests in the chamber today. This is a presentation of, I should say, an overview of an anticipated report by the Met Council that is relating to Metro Transit equity initiatives. And I will maybe just give a little bit of a preamble to this report, which is that we have been working quite hard with the Met Council on coming to some resolution around what might happen with Southwest Light Rail. And we are going through part of our process on that right now. And as part of the conversation about Southwest Light Rail, there has also been part of the conversation that talks about equity, which has talked about economic opportunities, job opportunities, connectedness to Southwest Light Rail, and a number of other things. There's been a coalition of community organizations and individuals that have put together a publicly available document. I know Congressman Ellison himself has helped convene some of these groups that put together some equity requests. And I will say, too, that we are waiting to kind of hear from the Met Council what is their response. This is the piece that has been missing, you might say, from the conversation to date, and that's why we're eagerly anticipating this. From the city's perspective, we have very strongly supported virtually all of the initiatives that have been identified by community groups as important to thinking about how transit can benefit all of our neighborhoods equitably. So just with that preamble, because there are some community coalition partners here in the room as well, and I want to acknowledge that they're here and thank them for being here. And Mr. Harrington from the Met Council is going to give us an overview and tell us what's been presented so far. We're also pleased to be joined by Met Council member Adam Dunnick, and I really thank you for taking your time to be here today. So, Mr. Harrington.
Very good. Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the council. I'm Adam Harrington. I'm the Director of Service Development at Metro Transit. And as you mentioned, this is really an overview of many different facets that Metro Transit and the council will be pursuing, in particular in 2014 and 2015, and really setting the groundwork for additional work yet to come on our Metro Transit equity initiatives, as well as throughout the council. So today we're going to be talking about a number of different pieces, everything from the service aspect of things, bus shelters, jobs, employment, transitways, safety and security, a number of different pieces, and we'll touch on each one of them, and I'm happy to take questions either along the way or at the end. So our existing service today, and I have outlined on this map the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and now the areas that we're referring to as racially concentrated areas of poverty. These are areas defined by the Met Council as part of the Thrive MSP project and report. And we're using these as a measure of where we want to focus our efforts to improve the equity measure. So I'll be referring to these as RCAPs as we move forward, but it gives you a frame of reference of geography and where we want to try and make those improvements happen. So the first thing I want to do is set a little bit of the groundwork of what we have out there today. So the map on the screen shows a number of blue dots laid upon the map with the RCAPs, and the darker the blue, the more number of bus trips serve that stop. So you can see that in the core cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, there's much more frequent service on our bus service than there are further out. And in fact, many of those routes serve those RCAP areas as well. There are 46 routes that serve those areas, and since 2010, we have had a significant increase in some cases on those routes specifically. So these measures give you some sense of it, and over the course of 5 years, it may not seem that great on weekdays, but there's some really focused efforts that have happened. In particular, I'll note Penn Avenue Route 19 has increased about 33% in the 4-year period that's part of that average. So there's some really big improvements that have been made in terms of service, serving these communities and the city of Minneapolis. I'll also point out on weekends that there are larger increases, and this is really where we have customers who do depend on transit, and they use that service on weekends to get to all of their other needs, and so seeing that improvement on weekends as well is a high value element. The green lines on the map illustrate some of those examples, not only in Minneapolis, but also in the St. Paul and East Metro. So,
Madam Chair.
Council President Johnson.
Madam Chair, do you, and Mr. Harrington, do you want us to wait till the end to ask questions or what?
I'm happy to take it either way.
Can you?
Why don't you go ahead then?
Okay. On that 19, tell me that statistic again about the 33% ridership in when did that, what's the time frame?
So on Route 19, which serves Penn Avenue and up to Brooklyn Center Transit Center, since 2010, we've had a 33% increase in bus trips, not rides,
Okay.
bus trips. But we have had a significant increase in ridership as well. So the number of buses that operate on that route has gone up.
Okay. We had a change though in 20, was that the year that the 19, didn't we split a route or something like that in that?
Madam Chair, Council President, in I believe it was 2008,
Was it? Oh,
when we did the restructuring of the Northwest Metro
Yeah.
area, Sector
Yeah.
8.
so that was 8, so this is maybe a part of that.
Well, no, this is after that. This is a couple years after. So we're measuring from 2010 on forward. So that would have had a couple years to settle in.
So I actually have a, oh, I'm sorry, Council President. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, okay, I'm just curious as to what, I mean, there is more service on, I guess I would say more service on Penn than we had before, so that makes sense. Okay, thanks.
But I was just going to ask a question because I think in that interim is when we started using the designation of high frequency routes. which sets a floor for a certain standard, and isn't 19 one of those high-frequency routes? Wouldn't that have anticipated bringing that up then to the proper standard for that route, and unless I'm just mistaking what was the interim
Well,
factor?
Madam Chair, the high-frequency network really defines what was out there at the
Mm-hmm.
time, and this was really a response to ridership as much as anything.
So it was already meeting that high-frequency
Right.
standard, which is the 10 minutes
15 minutes.
every 15 minutes? Okay. And then do we know do we also have figures on what were the increases in ridership for some of these routes?
I don't have them off the top of my head, but I'm happy to share them with you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So on that note, the next slide is about ridership, and again, starting out with the RCAP boundaries, and just so that there's an illustrative point behind frequency of bus service, number of trips that we serve these areas, and how many people use the service. So each dot represents how many people boarded at any one bus stop. And so you can see that the bigger dots, which all blend together in the core city, represent a higher number of boardings, a higher level of activity. And that's significant when we think about these RCAP areas. So when we measure this on the map, there's about 50,000, more than 50,000 boardings of weekday activity just in those RCAP areas against our total daily 260,000 plus rides. Now, if we take the downtowns out of that number, 260,000, it becomes even more significant, and it's probably half of the total daily boardings on those local routes are coming from RCAP. So it's a significant reason for us to invest in those areas. Now, a point was mentioned in conversations over the past several weeks, well, increasing the frequency is nice, and that's great, but what's the ride look like? Is it any better, any worse? And we did a study in 2011 to look at our whole system, what our fleet deployment has been, and found that typically on these 46 routes that serve RCAPs, there's actually newer buses on them than there are on the average. And that's important because we have actually a rather new fleet when we think about the industry. Our average age, I think, is about 6 years old, and the average age for route serving RCAPs is about 5.5 years old. And when you think about that window of time, and this gets to the new generation of buses, they're more reliable, they're cleaner, they're quieter, they're more efficient, and it's just significant, the difference between our fleet today and our fleet 10 years ago. And when we think about the comment about the sneaky, smelly, noisy buses, just isn't the case anymore. And we really do our best to make sure those good buses are on those all-day services. So the other piece related to that interface with the customer between the service and between the stop and the bus is what's going on at the stop. And this map represents all of the locations, all the bus stops that we have shelters at. And there are about 900 sheltered stops region-wide that we operate. That includes transit centers, park and rides, LRT stations, and those in downtown as well as at bus stops. There are a couple transit centers in the RCAP areas, most notably Brooklyn Center Transit Center and Chicago and Lake, as well as high-frequency service that comes into those areas. And if we look at what the warranted shelter placement rate is, what does it take to put a shelter in? This is the question. What do I have to do to get a shelter? Well, our minimum threshold to consider a shelter is about 25 boardings in a suburban area and 40 in an urban area, which would be the city of Minneapolis. Well, there are many places that meet that minimum threshold to consider adding a shelter, and in fact, the placement rate is about 52% region-wide, 54% in the RCAPs.
Can I just ask a question about that definition of 25 boardings in the suburban areas and then 40 in, did you say in Minneapolis, St. Paul? So it is just outside the border, so Edina, Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, all those touching, they all have a 25.
Madam Chair, that is correct. However, I will say that if you look at the map, a number of shelters that appear outside of the borders, the red line of Minneapolis and St. Paul, is pretty little. And when we think about the resource that we have as an agency available to deploy them and maintain them, that's been our challenge. And we've actually been playing catch up for a number of years. We've actually only added a few shelters in the last 4 years. If you think about that 2010 to 2014 period, Well, as we move forward, we want to improve upon this rate of 50%. And so what I want to draw your attention to, if I could, is the bar chart in the upper right, that 52, 54% number. How can we make that better overall? And one of the things that we'll be working on as an agency is what's the right measure of that? What's the right benchmark? Is 100% the right mark? Is 70%? And how do we get there? But we definitely want to make improvements on that now. So there's a couple things I could point on unless you wanted to follow up on that. So moving forward, our 2014-2015 capital budget for shelters includes installation of bus shelters at 75 to 100 new bus stop locations that currently don't have shelters, and replacing about 75 to 100 existing shelters that need replacement. So on this slide, there's a picture of a CBS shelter that Metro Transit recently took over for the city of Minneapolis, and it's shelters like this that we'll be replacing. And right before I left, I wish I would have taken a picture of it. Right outside at 7th and Olson, where the 5 and 19 serve, we just took out one of those shelters and replaced it with a new one last week. So it's our first step in moving in the right direction, and that one has advertising. And this is the challenge in how do we keep the balance of the CBS advertising revenue moving forward, but have a nice shelter for people to use. So replacing shelters like this is the goal.
We have a question from Councilmember Andrew Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if there are any plans or considerations with these bus shelters to add enhancements so that we can show riders when the next bus is coming to plug into that huge amount of data out there. You can think of a lot of great apps out there like OMG Transit right now, which is effectively doing that, but just some sort of display to make it easier and more convenient.
Madam Chair, Council Member, that's exactly where we're headed. And the question is really, how do we do that? So this next slide shows where generally we'd be looking at placing new shelters as kind of a baseline. And I just want to point out that the warranted shelter placement rate table, there's a green bar that grows, and now we're at 74% placement rate in our caps from 54%. It's a significant increase when we think about trying to do a better job of serving those populations, while as a regional average, we're only going up 8%. So,
Madam Chair, just to clarify, so when would we potentially expect to see those displays added to shelters, and would you retroactively go back and add in those sort of displays and information about real-time transit availability and how soon the next bus is going to arrive?
Right, Madam Chair, Councilmember Johnson, I'm just getting into the next slide to that very point. So this next slide, shelter amenity improvements. One of the things we've heard loud and clear is where can we get heated shelters specifically? Putting light in shelters is a little easier because it doesn't require the same level of electricity to light them. And so we're pretty effective at being able to do that where there's not already ambient street light outside. But we're applying for a federal grant that's due in August for about $3 million. And that grant is going to help us make those type of improvements to about 125 up to 150 existing locations where we might be able to put heat and that schedule information. And that's the exact kind of thing we want to do, particularly in areas like downtown, where we have routes that serve these areas that doesn't exist. And one of our main initiatives is on 7th Street heading to North Minneapolis. This year, we're working with the city and the property owner to improve the shelter, putting heat and light and that real-time schedule information there, and then subsequently at 7th and Nicollet as well. So that's two examples at high ridership locations, high and above the outside of downtown areas. But we're also thinking about what's the right application at a shelter that might be a little lower cost that gives you that information. So you can go on your phone and you can punch in where the bus stop is, and it'll tell you your next trip information. But wouldn't it be convenient if you just walk up there and it says right at the shelter that information? I think that's what you're getting at.
It sure is, and thank you for that answer. And I previously, before being on the council, worked on an IT innovation and proof of concept team, and I've seen little tiny displays that are Wi-Fi based that cost $5 You could transmit information to them and push it out. So I know the technology is there and that they have displays capable of doing that. And heck, you could put them on practically for $5 a display, practically every single bus stopping location out there on posts, anything. So it's exciting to see how that could really help improve the experience for riders. So thank you.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Johnson, I appreciate that. And this is, again, an application for federal funding. And I know we have the support of Congressman Ellison in pursuing this grant. And so we're very hopeful that this will happen. But even if it doesn't, we're going to continue to support other initiatives, other grant initiatives to get that resource. And I can tell you that our engineering facilities department is actively pursuing that very technology question. What's the right technology so we don't maybe need $3 million to do all the things we want to do? Maybe we have a lower cost solution, and how do we build that in to our budget moving forward? So thinking about all those aspects. So I want to transition a little bit to transitway planning. And when you think about transitway planning, there's a couple realms. One is developing a transitway plan that we can pursue, fund, and implement. And where this aspect of transitway planning comes in is after the pursuit, after the locally preferred alternative is done, and after it's funded, we get into high gear with planning the network. How is this transitway actually going to operate? How are the connecting routes going to work? What are the best connecting routes? And these are some objectives that we look at every time we're doing a transitway integration plan. So the best example is most recently a Green Line implementation on June 14th. We had a large volume of routes that we implemented. We did schedule integration. We had a great example, I think, of really beginning to tip the scale on our community engagement work by using the trusted advocate model in St. Paul. And we want to build upon that model at each transitway investment that we make. So again, this map of the transitway is overlaid upon the RCAPs, shows just how strong that they can make this connection for people living in these areas across the system. Now these yellow lines are 12 arterial bus rapid transit lines. All these are the locally preferred alternatives in the Met Council's transportation policy plan, and they really start to solidify the investment and the service that we have out there in the street. So all these pieces come together and really enhance that access from an RCAP standpoint. But also now when I layer on these gray shaded dots, these represent the employment concentrations region-wide, and they really do a good job of improving that connection, improving the accessibility through either frequency or new route connections or speed. And that's something that we really want to pay attention to as we move forward. And it's an ambitious plan because just between now and 2020, there's a lot of work to do. We've got a plan to do one arterial bus rapid transit line every year. We're starting next year with the A-line Snelling. Following that, we're pursuing the West 7th in St. Paul, and then C-line Penn Avenue serving North Minneapolis. So we'll have that, Orange Line Highway BRT, Southwest LRT, and then Botno LRT.
We have a question from Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wondered, I remember hearing about the Midtown corridor alternatives analysis and how it had come up with two recommendations. One was to promote some kind of rail option down the Greenway, and then the other option was also to support BRT improvements on Lake Street. And in my conversations with Michael Mechtenberg, thank you, I remember talking a lot about the Lake Street situation, and so I don't see that on your list now. And when I had talked to him before, I thought the plan was to have East Lake Street on there before 2020 as well.
Right. Madam Chair, Council Member, you'll note that there are 5 years between 2015 and 2020, and we've only identified the first three as part of the transportation policy plan, so there's clarity on that. We still have additional work to do in defining that and making sure that we can speak with some authority on how it fits in the priority of the transportation policy plan. Yep.
If you don't mind me just adding a point, thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. We've talked a lot about this corridor, in particular the Lake Street corridor, And there's a real question about what should be kind of the fourth and fifth lines, and both Lake Street and Chicago Emerson Fremont are both really strong, high-performing corridors. When we get to the decision point, we'll have to figure out which one makes the most sense from a timeline perspective and a planning perspective, but that's what staff has conveyed to us, and I know that there's a lot of people on the Met Council that are strong supporters of both those two corridors. It's just a matter of figuring out the prioritization.
So that was, you mentioned Fremont?
It would actually be an arterial BRT that runs Chicago and South Minneapolis, and then Emerson Fremont in North Minneapolis, which is unfortunately the budget equivalent of two arterial BRTs. So it's a lot longer of a corridor. But currently in the TPP, the fourth corridor is not named specifically, so it's an open-ended question and a policy question we'll have to grapple with. If an additional sales tax were to pass next legislative session, there's no doubt in my mind that we'd be able to complete 5 arterial BRTs in the next 5 years. And so then we would have to have that conversation about prioritization, what order the projects would be completed.
Okay, thank you.
So then I just wanted to build upon the community engagement piece a bit. I mentioned the trusted advocate model, and this is some pictures for different approaches that we've taken. We've had staff riding the bus, trying to get people on the bus to give us their feedback. We've gone out to the neighborhoods, and one of the advantages to the trusted advocate model that we used for informing our Central Corridor bus plan was that we actually get people engaged from the neighborhood to help us and work with us to help inform what are the best connections, what are the most important things that we should be doing. And each community is going to be different, and so we need to think about how we can improve upon that model. And one way that we're going to do that is to increase our staff resources to be able to facilitate those conversations and continue growing that aspect of our planning work. So once we get into the project development and construction, here's a reference to Southwest LRT, and this is a goal that was defined by the Department of Human Rights, and that is a 32% minority hiring goal. Right now, council-wide, we have a goal of 30% for all minorities and women, and so this raises the bar, and I think our goal is to actually push that up higher, and we're looking at the metrics of what's the population available to help move that number up. And of course we want to target local labor forces, drawing as much as we can from the community. And one of the pieces that Wanda Kirkpatrick talked about yesterday was that we need to make sure people are trained. We need to be able to provide training, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. But as we move forward, the project development and construction, we want to make sure we've got those connections between transit and jobs. We want to cultivate affordable housing along those station areas and partner with landowners and the cities to help really bring that transit-oriented development view into play. And so this photo is from the corner of Dale and University, I believe Frogtown Square is what it's called. And it's one of those very successful developments that's happened. And this is happening all along the Green Line as well. So a little bit more about equal opportunity as it relates to hiring. I spoke to this a bit already. Disadvantaged business enterprise goals, moving those up from 32% and beyond. Part of that is identifying what the possibilities are and how we improve training and making sure that we have the right skilled labor force from a construction standpoint, from an implementation standpoint, and really cultivating our relationship with the neighborhoods. And then developing those apprenticeship programs to facilitate that option as well.
Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, one of the things, Mr. Harrington, I think that people don't understand about your employment force is the number of people that work for you that live in these RCAPs. And one of the things that I've seen other employers do that I think is very useful is sort of to plot, where their employees live. And, I just want to say thank you, because I think you are probably one of the largest employers in North Minneapolis. And so take credit for it. But I found that to be really useful when somebody comes down, sits down and talks to you and says, this is where our employees live, and you can see that you have a lot of them in your area. It's very helpful. So thank you.
Madam Chair, Council President, thank you. And it's true, in that North Minneapolis area, Metro Transit's the largest employer, and we have a very large number of people who live in North Minneapolis and work for us, be it on a mechanic end, of a bus operator, or in the administration as well. So that's maybe something that we can add to the mix.
Good. Thank you.
So lastly, the underpinning of making sure our ride is comfortable and safe, our police force. And one of the things that our police department has been doing a really great job of, in particular in the last year or two, is really getting out into the community. There have been a lot of community events. Coming up in a couple weeks, we've got Neighborhood Night Out. We've got police participating in those events. We had Juneteenth earlier this year and last year where they participated in events in North Minneapolis. They're doing things in St. Paul as well. So that's been a big part of it. We also have added a new foot beat. So we've got a new foot patrol on West Broadway between, I think, Lyndale and Penn, and that's been an effective way to actually interact with people rather than be in the squad car. So that's worked out quite well, as well as in downtown Minneapolis. And one of the biggest things I wanted to mention to you is the thank you to the city of Minneapolis for partnering with our Metro Transit Police on so many things, and Safe Zone and downtown, and helping out with our police substation at City Center. And it's been a really good success in being able to work together, and with the Hennepin County Sheriff Department as well. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
I think we do have a few questions, and Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's not really a question, but I just did want to acknowledge your participation, especially with Chief Harrington, no relation to you, I'm assuming, who has been very actively involved in an initiative that Councilmember Fry and I myself have been working on with the Nicollet Mall livability issues, especially as we're taking advantage of the tremendous investment from the state on the Nicollet Mile, and how to make that a safe, livable experience for residents and for visitors out of town and from employers of downtown Minneapolis. So it's just another example of how these jurisdictions can work together to improve the lives, and not only the ridership, but the safety of everybody in downtown Minneapolis. And just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things that we've talked about too is you have a fantastic camera system, and how can we get our cameras to mesh?
Well, Madam Chair, Council President, that's an excellent question. That fits right in with the Safe Zone initiative, particularly in downtown Minneapolis. I think we probably have a little ways to go when we get outside of downtown Minneapolis, but we're already working on integrating that camera information between police departments and our control center. We actually have a radio system that links together so that there's good communication between the Sheriff Department, MPD, Metro Transit Police, and our transit control center. So that really helps be a little bit more agile in our activities.
But I think, if you think about the 5 and the 19, we're going to have, if we do have increased shelters and that kind of thing, we obviously wouldn't want to duplicate if we have a camera on Penn and Dowling, right, that and you have a shelter there, you wouldn't want to duplicate them. You'd want to have them work together. And so, we're going to be we're heavily cameraed now on the north side. We will probably be even more, and we should be talking. Our camera should be talking to each other, I guess is what I'm saying. So, and we can be helpful to you. You can be helpful to us. And then, Councilmember Johnson is showing me this app on his cell phone that shows these transit connections. Well, one of the issues we have with our bus stops in North Minneapolis is you're in real danger if you pull your phone out. So, I think a lot of the robberies, the police tell us, are from people, at transit stops getting off, and then they get robbed for their cell phone and other things. But so I just think we as we plan, we should plan together about the security measures, safety measures that we can see on these routes. Thank you.
Well, want to thank Council President Johnson for bringing up this idea about how we might be able to share access to camera systems. I think it's a way to leverage the resources of our police department as well as Metro Transit, and a way to enhance safety for people using the transit system. And so I just would encourage maybe there is a way to kind of follow up on Council President's suggestion to see what it would take to realize some of those improvements. Just one thing too I wanted to mention. I feel like I see some, and I know you have an actual report that has not yet been issued, and you may want to give us a little bit more of a timeline on those things that are next steps. But I know there were some things that you might characterize more as kind of big ideas that were identified by some of the advocacy groups working on suggestions for human capital development and job opportunities that had to do with connecting transit to anchor institutions. I think there was something along those lines that actually was done for Central Corridor, and there might be additional opportunities, certainly with Southwest, as well as how we might leverage loan funds or other creative opportunities to build our small business community in a way that leverages this really large investment in light rail for Southwest. Can you respond to, and again, I know we've got an actual report coming, this is just the PowerPoint. Can you respond to any of those things?
Madam Chair, thank you for mentioning that. We will be putting out a report, hopefully tomorrow, that is the culmination of the PowerPoint you're looking at today. Specific to the responses relative to Southwest, that a couple things. One, when we get into the planning process for Southwest LRT, assuming we get to that funding stage and we end up landing into the construction area in late 2015, early 2016, that's really when we're going to get into our planning, where we do our existing conditions report on all the bus routes that could be connecting to it, really starting to take the ideas on where people want to make connections and how we can make those connections to those new employment centers. So, for example, we've already heard that people want a connection from Penn Avenue to the Penn Avenue station on Southwest LRT, from North Minneapolis to Van Wyck and Royalston, and how do we access jobs along Southwest LRT where there will be those big employers. So that's one piece of it, and we already know those things are coming, and being able to think about that proactively for us is helpful. As it relates to job opportunities and leveraging that, and perhaps I would even throw the training aspect into it, I believe there's a number of resources available already for minorities and low-income people to leverage that business opportunity. But as was discussed last night at the council meeting, is that we really need to work with our partner agencies and with our partner philanthropic groups to try and generate some type of fund to help sustain that throughout a construction project. But I think the intent for the ask in the first place was, is this something that could be an ongoing type of tool? And that's something that I know we're looking at.
Okay. So the plan's getting released tomorrow, and then what's the process after that?
We'll be reviewing internally over the next days and week the public comment process on it. And again, this is a high-level plan, and it's just the beginning. This is by no means the be-all and end-all plan. This is our action step. This is here's what we're going to do in the next 2 years. Here's what we can do, and here's one way we're going to pursue things, and we'll continue to expand that and grow that. I think we're making good progress, but clearly there's also ways we can improve as well. So I would say that probably moving forward in the comment process, what we're looking for is what are those additional things that people would like to see beyond this plan.
And when do you anticipate the plan would go back to the council for approval?
Met Council is looking to approve a plan this fall. I don't have specific timelines at this point, though.
Okay, but before the end of the year?
Yep.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry, Councilmember Andrew Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to speak, going back a bit to the camera piece for a second. I serve on the Metropolitan Emergency Services Board, and one of the things we're doing is looking at interoperability of the radio networks for our public safety sector, and I'm wondering perhaps if our IGR department has any information on that, or maybe that's something that you could come back to us with if there's a similar push or effort, both from a state or a metro or even a federal level, to create interoperability of camera systems that are utilized by public safety. Thanks.
That sounds like a good report back, so thank you for that. Not seeing further questions. I didn't know if Councilmember Dunick wanted to make any comment, or if you would like to.
I promise to be brief. Just to say a word of thanks to you and to your colleagues who helped with the Southwest Light Rail negotiations. It was a lot of work. I want your colleagues to know you're very well represented by Councilmember Glidden, Councilmember Reich, as well as the mayor's office, and it was a pleasure working with everyone. I know that in negotiations, both sides never get everything that they want, but hopefully come out feeling like we've improved the position from where we started to where we are now. The one thing I just want to add to a lot of the great work that we're starting to put together to release in the next couple of days is the fare policy, because that was also an important issue raised by equity advocates, and we talked a lot about that. We've been talking about revisiting our fare policy for a number of months, and we actually had a couple different proposals earlier this spring, but decided not to move forward on them because there was a little bit of disagreement internally about whether we should look at raising some fares to offset some of the fares that we wanted to lower. But that's something that we're going to, I think, be dealing with very much so in the next year. I don't know if we'll get to it by the end of this year, but certainly by the first and second quarters of next spring, we really want to take a look at fare policy, both in terms of a fairness standpoint, if we want to look at charging more for longer trips and that sort of thing, or if we want to look at doing discounted fares in certain areas. I have some ideas about it. In particular, we've actually had a little bit of an experiment happening along the North Star the North Star commuter line. It's not an exact parallel example, but just to let everyone here know, we reduced fares for a number of stops along North Star, and we were able to gain enough ridership back that the cost subsidy was break even. And so I think that there's a potential for us to take a look at some creative, if not definitive fare structure across the board changes, at least maybe pilot some potential changes along some corridors and take a look at and see what the impacts on ridership would be. So that's something that we really look forward to working on, and we'll be in communication with the city about that.
Thank you very much for that. Well, this is not a public, I want to say thank you to the Met Council for on very short notice agreeing to come and be part of our committee here. We thought it was an opportunity. We often do receive in this committee reports of regional importance, and then through our committee, we often will put together some type of comment from the city of Minneapolis on that, and so I would anticipate we would follow that same procedure here and be doing so again through this committee. So thank you so much for being here. This is not a public hearing today, but I did agree to have at least I think one or two of individuals who are representing, I think, really what's a collection of organizations that I would characterize as really starting this conversation more specific to Southwest Light Rail and raising these issues of equity. And so I wanted to go ahead and invite, if I think Mr. Newby was going to make some brief comments, and Mr. Adams, and if you would like to come forward, we'd be pleased to hear from you. This is, if you want to go ahead, introduce yourself. Okay.
So my name is Anthony Newby. I'm the director of an organization called Neighborhoods Organizing for Change. Our office is on the north side. We're a member-led organization that works throughout the metro area and under-resourced communities and communities of color. So first I want to say thank you to you all for having a meeting yesterday where folks were able to come in. Our transit organizer, Michael, came through and was able to get a glimpse of the plan, and we're thankful that you took the time and effort to pull that together yesterday. Also, thank you for moving forward with a plan. We've advocated all along that this thing should be built. It should be built in an equitable way, but let's get out of this stuck in the mud position that we've been in for months and build it. It's going to employ a lot of people. It's going to connect a lot of people to parts of the region where they normally wouldn't have access to. So congratulations to you all for moving forward and working together to get it done. And then I have to say I'm totally confused by the presentation. And I'm looking at allies. Some of you I know, Adam I know very well, and we've worked together and we'll continue to work together. Some of you folks I want to get to know. We've worked for months talking to community folks to put together essentially what we consider a community benefits agreement, which is talking to people on the bus, where they live, bus riders, transit riders, and we thought we were in a legitimate negotiation. We thought with the Alliance and the work we had done with the Alliance, with a group of base building organizations putting together an agenda for some things that we would like to see included in this line that prioritizes racial justice and racial equity in a way that I know we all care about and want to work towards. We had done that work, and we want to continue to do that work. I don't see any of it represented. And I'm frankly, I'm legitimately confused because I thought we were in a negotiation. I thought all of us were working collaboratively. I know we had sent staff and members to meet with you all, and you all have been great allies. And we know, some of y'all ran on equity platforms, and we know that it's a priority for you all, and you've proved it over time. And the same thing with Adam and the folks that we know in the Met Council. We know that it's a priority. But when we look at the end result in the PowerPoint, and it doesn't include any of the stuff, or very little of it, that we had prioritized, it sort of makes me wonder. And I know it's going to make our members wonder when they see the PowerPoint, sort of like, where is the stuff that we had put together? So I hear, Adam, you saying that this is not the be-all, end-all. I see Mr. Harrington, I heard you say the same thing, that this is a starting point. We believe that, and in good faith, we trust that that's the case. We also have to say, congratulations for building it, and this is not the equity plan that we have put together and want to push forward over time. There's things in there related to housing, heated bus shelters, and I've heard, by the way, you all make multiple ideas that were fantastic in the span of the last 30 minutes about apps that we could be using, about security issues, and those are things that are in our agenda that we thought were on the table, and we don't see them in the PowerPoint presentation. So what I want to say very clearly is congrats for putting this together and for getting it done. We've wanted that all along, and we've advocated for that, in fact. And we want to be involved. And when I say we, I don't simply mean NOC. I mean our members. I mean the Alliance for Metro Stability. I mean the People's Transit, Isaiah, NOC, Take Action, base building organizations with thousands of members, many of them in the metro area and in the communities right along the line. We want to be engaged directly in some of these decisions. We think we deserve to be. We have a very clear analysis of a racial justice agenda that would be part of the plan, not the entire plan. We recognize that this is a regional equity play, and there are lots of folks along the line, lots of different communities along the line that have to be considered, and we think that's great. We also have folks waiting at essentially poles in the ground in North Minneapolis. And when I hear things like, we're going to put some heated bus shelters and we're going to start downtown Minneapolis. Downtown and Nicollet Avenue has heated bus shelters. Now, doesn't mean we shouldn't have more, but when we look outside of our office, it's poles in the ground and mothers and children waiting at a bus stop in the cold when it's 30, 40 below zero. And it gives me pause when I hear we have to find the money. This is a $1.7 billion project. It's ludicrous for me or for our transit organizers to go back to our members and say, there isn't enough money. Maybe we'll get a couple heated bus shelters on Nicollet Avenue, but we can't afford to get heated bus shelters at a bare minimum in North Minneapolis.
And Mr. Newby, I'm going to gently ask you if you could conclude, please.
So I appreciate the time. The spirit of this, let me be very clear. The spirit of this is a very clear thank you for moving it forward. Thank you for getting us out of this stuck in the mud moment we're in. And thank you for saying and leaving the door open for a longer tiered negotiation that will prioritize racial and economic justice in the state. We'd love to be a part of it.
Okay, thank you. And I did promise, I'll just say, Mr. Adams, if you want to say something brief that is maybe something that's all right, that has not been said.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I want to echo the spirit of congratulations on the tentative plan and agreement that was reached. I also want to say I've enjoyed the cooperation of both Councilwoman Glidden and Councilmember Dunnick in terms of discussing equity before the cone of silence was put down during the private negotiations, and then after the cone of silence was lifted. I think what Anthony really points out to is I think people are looking for some sort of guarantees, some sort of written confirmation that we're all committed to moving forward on these issues, and we're not there yet, right? And we're at that moment in a campaign where there's some tensions that come up, where we're staging things. Things are not quite fully fleshed out yet. So knowing that, I would just say today to all of you, this is an opportunity to make this project much more better in terms of equity and equitable outcomes. There is an opportunity to create strategic collaborations, not just between the city and the Met Council, but also Hennepin County and the feds and community members. And I think that's the next step for this process, right? So we've got a really impressive document that 30 organizations, many of them rooted on the north side, communities, representative of communities of color, led by people of color, that put together a bunch of incredible ideas. More ideas just came up in the last 30 minutes, as Anthony said. What we need to do is all be sitting down in the same room and stage this out. So I think a strategic planning process where we look at a calendar and we look at a timeline, we say, what are the automatic things we know are going to happen in the next year? What are the pieces that we need to be preparing for, including the equitable hiring? Because it's not a done deal that we'll hit 32%. And if we want to hit 40%, which is the stretch goal we suggest, we really have to start planning for that. That's just an example. Lastly, I want to say that there's some real opportunity for catalytic transit-oriented development at 3 station stops on the north side. We have folks from Harrison neighborhood here. They have continuously wanted to have a conversation about how we can make Van Wyck a showcase of transit-oriented development. They want the density. They want to grow the population. They want to meet the vision that Ryan Companies is trying to accomplish. That should be part of these conversations also. It's not just about the jobs, which are critical, not just about the connections that we want to build with all of the enhanced bus routes and regular bus routes. It's also about what kind of economic activity we can generate and leverage for places like Harrison. So thank you so much for tonight, this afternoon's opportunity to speak, and we look very forward to working with you, and we want you to know that you're not alone. You have strategic partners. So we're asking a lot, but we'll stand there with you every step of the way.
Okay, thank you. We do have a couple additional comments or questions from council members, Council President Johnson and then Council Member Fry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, one of the things that I think we're trying to do here is sort of too closely tie what we're asking for in North Minneapolis and some of the other communities, I just speak for myself, to this particular project, Southwest. Because, I view this whole transit system, and I love the stats about what percentage of the transit users come from communities of racially concentrated areas of poverty. Because we are, one-fifth of the total boardings. We are half of the total boardings of the whole metro system if you exclude downtown. So, to me, it isn't about Southwest Light Rail. It's about this whole transit system that we have funded through our taxes for years and years and years that we're not getting the bang for our buck, I guess is what I view it as, and the amenities that are seen in other places. So I'm not necessarily so interested in tying it to Southwest. I think we have a legitimate case to make about the whole Metro Transit budget. So that's where I'm coming from. But I really appreciate the discussion. I appreciate people, putting their needs on the table. And Mr. McDowell visited with me about his work. I saw his video on Facebook, and I think that's what we need to do. The other thing that I think is important, and Mr. Newby, one of the things that has happened in North Minneapolis, I think we have to reach out to people who have left the Metro Transit system as well because of some of the challenges that they've experienced, waiting for the bus, unpleasant ride, that kind of thing, and figure out. And I know Metro Transit is interested in doing this too, getting them back into the system so that we have. Again, resources to do the kind of things that we want to do. So, thank you.
Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple points. A few I've already addressed several months ago. The first is the line, the Southwest Light Rail line, in and of itself is not an equity train. If you add additional amenities, if we're able to incorporate North Minneapolis more, I think we can get a whole lot further in that direction. But the line in and of itself, while it does benefit my ward extraordinarily, I think there are a lot of communities, specifically communities of color, that it could use some work. And so hopefully we make some strides in that direction. The second point is just on the minority hiring piece. And I think we've seen that simply putting up a sign that says, brown people are welcome to apply, that doesn't actually get you there. Just this morning, I saw an article, I think it was in the Strib, that talked about how Coloplast, they had these minority hiring goals. And I really don't know what kind of internal processes that they had to recruit minorities, but they didn't come anywhere close to meeting the goal, and now they owe the city a whole bunch of money. So, in order to recruit, I think we have to properly plan. And in order to properly plan, we need to get going on it. So I think we're all on the same page in terms of the direction we need to go. It's just about working quickly to get there.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. I do want to say again, thank you very much. We really appreciate that you came here and you invited us to be part of the conversation, and I appreciate too, we're waiting to actually see the document, so we'll anticipate that and then be part of the process moving forward. So thank you very much. We have one more item on our agenda, and it is getting an update on our federal agenda and then a proposed timeline for updating our federal agenda. We regularly do this. I will say, because we kind of have seemed to be in a perpetual state of being stuck in Congress, this has not really received as much attention as our work around our state legislative agenda. And our plan for today is to receive just a brief update from Mr. Ranieri for you to review the documents our staff is proposing for additions to the federal agenda, and then we'll take action next cycle.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. I'd like to start with just a historic overview. And if you looked at a Minneapolis federal agenda back in 2008, 2009, you would see three major sections. One section was specific projects we would request an appropriation for. That's a big term for an earmark. And we proposed several earmarks, including some programs like for ex-offenders. We had proposals for combined sewer overflow projects, water projects, several building projects. We received some of those earmarks with the help of our congressional delegation, and particularly Representative Ellison. Since 2009, 2010, we don't have that section anymore because Congress stopped doing earmarks, one at their own insistence and also the insistence of the president. So in effect, we dropped all of those specific earmarks that we had developed over the last couple of years. The second section is grants and appropriations that we would apply for and we would expect to receive. Well, Congress hasn't done an appropriation process for the last 5 years. And we're going to suggest in our next draft of the city's federal agenda is a different approach to the appropriations process, be a little bit more general. And in the third section of our legislative agenda are the policies that we adopted, and we adopted over the last 2 years in 6 separate times about 8 additional projects, 8 additional policies. Those policies range all the way from immigration, the DREAM Act, minimum wage, federal minimum wage, the issue dealing with, I'm drawing a blank here, but it was Citizens United. We had a position there and several other positions. What we'd like to do is update those, and we have it in the documents. We have 4 documents in front of you. One is the 2012-2013 agenda as it is. The second item is a summary. It is a table that takes each individual legislative federal policy and goes through them and tells you which ones we accomplished. And several had been accomplished. And many of them, again, we thank our state delegation and our Congressman Ellison for, is one would be the invasive carp we were able to achieve. There are some other things dealing with urban agriculture. There was a concern over the last couple of years for financing for urban farming and Homegrown Minneapolis and programs like that. It has been approved in the Farm Bill. However, it has been authorized for funding, but not any dollars have been appropriated. So many of the things that we've accomplished, they're partially accomplished. The money's not there. So we'd also like to highlight those. So Madam Chair, roughly, and we also have some items that are new. For example, the one thing I'd like to bring to your attention is number one is the Federal Highway Trust Fund. Today, the House Committee on Ways and Means passed a bill that would fund that program through May of 2015. It would take it by taking revenues from existing taxes, existing revenues, and transfer them in. The Senate has a similar proposal, but there's a major difference. They would like to have the program, the new funding, take the trust fund through December 31st, 2014. In effect, it would then need to have some sort of action after the election. And I think the philosophy of the Senate is, let's try not only solve the trust fund temporarily, but in November, December, make it a permanent increase. There's some members of the Senate are suggesting a 12-cent increase in the gas tax. Others are suggesting review of the whole tax system. So in a sense, I guess I would suggest that we're going to probably see a continuation, short-term continuation of the Highway Trust Fund, and probably see a discussion about what to do with transportation funding in this country, probably more closely after January 1st, 2015. So, Madam Chair, that is another one issue. And one other issue is the Supreme Court has made some decisions over the last couple of weeks that we may want to weigh in on, example, and we will try and draft some language on that. What we would like to do is visit with some members. If you have calls, please let us know some changes you may have, and we'll get back to you. And maybe not next time we would have it ready, but maybe at least a cycle before the end of the summer.
All right. Well, I think with that, what I will do is receive and file this report, and I'm not seeing any questions from council members, so we will receive and file. All in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And with that, I believe we have concluded with our business, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much.